Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining. We're going to start as we usually do with tzedakah, charity. Okay, take a coin, you can pass it on, or dollar bill. Oh, I'll pass it to you. Okay. Actually, I am going to pause the recording for just a moment. I need to grab one thing. I'm not stopping it, just pausing it. Yeah, and just like that, there's another book in front of me. Okay. If you'd like to sponsor tonight's class or a future class, please reach out to me at rabbi@jewisherie.com. Before we get into the class, we'll start with our traditional halacha, our Jewish law. It's going to be a short one today. So is recorded a number of things that one should not do because they are, quote, kasha l'shikcha. They can cause memory loss. These are not things that are necessarily directly related with memory loss, like don't shake your head too hard or something like that. But this is more of a spiritual thing. Here in this law, in the laws of getting dressed in the morning, or getting dressed and the way you go about your day. So it lists one particular thing related to getting dressed, which is a person should take care not to put on two articles of clothing at the same time. For doing so may cause a loss of memory. Very interesting. Don't put on two pairs of clothes at the same time. Don't put two pieces of clothing at the same time. Another one I just learned recently, it doesn't say it here, but they say not to eat bread that was not fully baked. Interesting. Okay. Because for the same reason. The tip of the needle. If you need a copy of this and you want it, you can get an email as well. The piercing tip of the needle facilitates the connection between two pairs of a garment. What is the lesson we can learn from this, and how can we, quote unquote, sew materialism and spirituality together? Okay. A brief introduction. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, of blessed memory, the Rebbe's father, served as the rabbi of Yekaterinoslav, which is now Dnipropetrovsk, if I pronounce that right, in Ukraine, then part of the USSR. He was one of the prominent Jewish rabbis and leaders in the Soviet Union. During his later years, when the communists ruled the Soviet Union, most of the elite of Russian Jewry left. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak remained a prominent Jewish leader there. He firmly and proudly stood by the principles of Judaism and did not succumb to the dictates of the oppressive regime. As a result, he suffered greatly at the hands of the authorities, who ultimately sentenced him to exile in remote Kazakhstan, where he eventually passed away. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was a fascinating personality, a genius in all areas of Torah. However, he was particularly renowned as a Kabbalist and as a pioneer in the study of Kabbalah. He introduced many novel teachings in Torah study and recorded them, but most were lost when the Nazis made their name be erased, captured the city where he served as a rabbi. The few writings that survived were mainly from the last period of his life, during the exile from which he never returned. There, with the help of his wife, Rebbetzin Chana, who improvised writing materials for him, he wrote his teachings on the margins of the books he had with him. How many books did he have with him? There's actually pictures you can see of the writings. You have the Torah book that he had with him. He had like 4 or 5 books, if I'm not mistaken. Very little, very few, compared to the hundreds and probably thousands that he had originally. And he wrote literally on the margins, or like we're talking on the sides of the page over here, on the bottom and the top, his notes, his comments, and explanations. Rebbetzin Chana heroically saved these writings, risking her life to take them with her when she left the Soviet Union. These writings became the foundation of the series of books containing his Torah thoughts called Likutei Levi Yitzchak. On the 20th of the month of Av, this year, which is actually this Shabbos, tomorrow night, we will mark the 80th anniversary of the passing of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak in 1944. This is a fitting opportunity to study a talk by the Rebbe in which he conveys one of his father's teachings. Now, I'm going to let you know in advance that the Rebbe's father's teachings are profoundly, both incredibly fascinating. Just to read it is fascinating. The way his mind works is unfathomable. You read it on the paper and you're like blown away every line. On the other hand, it's also not completely. It's very incomprehensible. It's Kabbalah and it's gematrias, if you're familiar with that idea. and it's very hard to study, but we have many explanations from the Rebbe, from the Rebbe Levi Yitzchak's son, to help us understand some of his father's teachings. So this is one such case. Okay, section A. The yahrzeit of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson. On the 20th of Av, 1989. How many years ago is that? Do the math. 35 years ago. Did I get that right? Yeah, 35 years ago. Chabad Hasidim marked 45 years since the passing of the Rebbe's father. The Rebbe led the prayers that day and recited Kaddish for his father as is customary. Unusually, the Rebbe was joined for the afternoon prayer by children who had arrived from Chabad camps in upstate New York about 3 hours away. They came to Brooklyn especially for this occasion. After the service, the Rebbe was to speak before those gathered, but before he began, he turned to his secretary and asked for someone to translate his remarks into English for the benefit of those children in the audience who didn't understand Yiddish. The Rebbe began by noting the presence of the children, explaining that it would be fitting to convey a teaching of his father that would be understandable to them. Okay, so let's see. Combining the revealed and inner dimensions of Torah. Page 1. As is known, my father's entire life was devoted to Torah study, including spreading Torah in his surroundings, even when that required risking his life. He focused in particular on uniting the inner dimension of the Torah, the soul of Torah, with the revealed dimension of Torah, the simple meaning. It is therefore appropriate to discuss a point from my father's teachings that is related to the Mishnayot studied on the day of a yahrzeit and explain it in a manner that will be clearly understandable even for children. Most importantly, this teaching can inspire everyone to increase their efforts in all aspects of Judaism, both personal efforts and efforts focused on influencing others. Of course, this teaching can also be useful for the adults with white beards, encouraging increased activity for spreading Torah law and the wellsprings of the inner dimension of Torah. So what the teaching the Rebbe is going to focus on and pull up the lesson out of is going to be relevant for all Jews, anyone who was there present in 1989, and also for us learning and studying this in 2024. Whether we have no beards, whether we're young, whether we have white beards, we have whatever the style we look as Jew, this will be relevant to us. Very interesting story behind this talk of the Rebbe that we're going to study today, related to this teaching of the Rebbe's father. The fascinating story is like this. The day before, so this public address was for the kids at the camp, kids of camp, was on a Monday the 20th of Av, 1989. The previous day, on Sunday, the 19th of Av, a gathering of Chabad emissaries to the land of Israel took place in the city of Kfar Chabad. It's near Tel Aviv. During the gathering, one of the elder Hasidim, whose name is Reb Mendel Futterfass, of blessed memory, who remembered the Rebbe's father and had the privilege of having a relationship with him, recounted that on one occasion, when Rabbi Levi Yitzchak marked the yahrzeit of one of his family members and recited Kaddish, he explained a Mishnah that is traditionally studied on a yahrzeit, which we're going to delve into today. And the Mishnah goes, if a ritually unclean needle is placed on one of the steps leading to a mikveh in a cave. Okay, Mendel remembered the explanation and shared it with the participants at the gathering. Fine. That evening, one of the organizers of the gathering, whose name was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Librov, wrote a brief report about the event, noting that Reb Mendel Futterfass shared a story about the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. He wrote this in his report, and he sent the report to the Rebbe's secretary via fax. The fax was sent to Israel to New York that night. Nowadays, you can send an email or a message even faster than that. That day, the Rebbe had an especially busy schedule. After the morning prayers, the Rebbe distributed dollars for charity to thousands of people, ending at 2:30 p.m. At 4 p.m., the Rebbe went to immerse in the mikveh, then traveled to the ohel, the resting place of his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, to pray. He returned to Crown Heights in Brooklyn at 9 p.m., where he then prayed the afternoon and evening prayers. And after the evening prayers, the Rebbe went up to his room, and only then was he able to eat for the first time that day, because the Rebbe had a custom not to eat anything the day he visited his father's resting place, the ohel, until he got back. When the Rebbe received the report from the gathering, from Israel, he instructed his secretary, Rabbi Groner, to call Rabbi Liberov and clarify the details of the story that Reb Mendel Futterfass had told about the Rebbe's father. He wanted to know more. It was in the wee hours of the morning in Israel when Rabbi Liberov received a phone call from Rabbi Groner, who said to him, wash your hands. because you're supposed to wash your hands when you get up in the morning, or early in the morning. After Rabbi Liberov washed his hands, Rabbi Groner informed him that after the Rebbe returned from the Ohel, he reviewed the report and noticed the mention of a story about his father, but without further details. The Rebbe requested to know the full details of the story. So the Rebbe asked for the details, so the secretary called this Rabbi Liberov in Israel at 3 a.m, right? He woke him up. Rabbi Liberov did not remember the exact details of the story, so he responded to the secretary that later that morning, he would meet with Reb Mendel Futterfass, talk with him, get the details, and then send the complete story. Fine. He hangs up. A few minutes later, Rabbi Groner called again and told him that the Rebbe said he would not eat until he heard the full details of the story. Remember, he's been fasting the whole day. Rabbi Liberov rushed to Reb Mendel's house, woke him from his sleep, and told him that his story had already reached the Rebbe's ears. But the Rebbe wanted to know all the details. He wrote down the details as Reb Mendel recounted them and immediately sent them to the Rebbe's secretary. 24 hours later, on Monday evening, New York time, when the Rebbe delivered a talk to the children, he taught the fresh Torah insight that Reb Mendel Futterfass had heard from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak and recounted just the day before. And we will now study that same teaching of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak as explained by the Rebbe. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. I want to clarify one thing. The Rebbe was the most sensitive person to people, the most loving, caring, and would never do anything to harm a soul. On the contrary, would do everything to cause comfort and joy to somebody else. So if the Rebbe was asking to wake somebody up in the middle of the night, and the Rebbe knew what time it was in Israel, he was very well aware, and he knew that this guy was sleeping. So if he was asking to find out now the details of the story, there was good reason for it. I'll just share a similar story that I remember hearing once. There was one time a Chabad rabbi, I forgot where, I think in America, he was trying to arrange for Jewish inmates in a prison to, I think it was light Hanukkah candles on Hanukkah, if I'm not mistaken. And and he had written to the Rebbe saying that he's working on this, and he hasn't made any headway. He's trying to be working with the warden of the prison, and it's nothing's happening. So it was late at night one night, and this rabbi gets a call from one of the Rebbe's secretaries. It's late at night, and he says the Rebbe wants to know the Rebbe wants you to call the warden and tell him the importance of these inmates lighting the Hanukkah candles, and he should do everything in his power to make sure that it can actually happen. So he said, "Okay, no problem. I'll call him," and he hung up. So he got ready for bed. He went to sleep. He can't. It was like 12 or 1 in the morning. Can't call somebody's house middle of the night about the Hanukkah candles. So he didn't think twice about it. He said, "Okay, I'll call him in the morning." So he's getting ready for bed, and he stopped himself. He said, "1 second. The Rebbe had his secretary call me now. He could have called me earlier in the day. He could have called me tomorrow. He called me now in the middle of the night to ask me to call this warden. I mean, I feel a little uncomfortable, but I feel like the Rebbe wants me to call him right now." So he picked up the phone. He dialed the warden's number, and lo and behold, the warden was sleeping, and he woke him up from his sleep. First, he was like frustrated. "Why are you waking me up?" And he said, I need to talk to you about the Jewish inmates. They need to light Hanukkah candles. Can you help do everything in your power to arrange this? And he said, "Let me deal. I'll try to deal with it." And he hung up on him, and he arranged it. He arranged that the Jewish inmates should light the Hanukkah candles. And he told this rabbi, he said, "By the way, I want you to know something. When you called me in the middle of the night to ask me about this, at first I was like, why are you calling me in the middle of the night? But then I saw that you're calling me in the middle of the night to ask about these inmates lighting candles. I saw how crucial it was to you, how important it was. I realized something really needs to be done about this. So I made it, to put it on the top of my priority list that this should happen." It's a very interesting story. Okay, connected with this. Okay, so way back to the talk over here. Section B, the Mishnah, page 2. This Mishnah in the tractate, the book of Mikvaot, deals with vessels that became ritually impure. It discusses the case of a person who immersed a needle, a small little needle. But fearing it would slip out of his grasp and disappear, he placed it on the steps of the mikvah, the ritual bath, then created a wave with his hand to rise and cover the needle. The question is this considered a proper immersion? Maybe the needle has to be actually put into the water instead of having it sit on a step and having a little wave go over it. So says the Mishnah, source 1, if a ritually unclean needle is placed on one of the steps leading to a mikveh in a cave, and someone sets the water in motion, the needle is purified when a wave passes over it. Okay? Now, I don't usually do this, but I want to read this Mishnah again, and I want you to pay attention to the words, because the Rebbe, based on the teaching from his father, is going to examine basically every single word of this and explain it spiritually. This is talking about a physical scenario. We're going to explain the spiritual connotation of this. So again, source 1. If a ritually unclean needle is placed on one of the steps leading to a mikveh in a cave, and someone sets the water in motion, the needle is purified when a wave passes over it. Okay, so let's see. The Rebbe says, one of the Mishnayot we study for a yahrzeit is the well-known Mishnah that teaches, I'll spare you. The Rebbe says the whole thing again, so we're not going to read it a third time. Yeah, it's purified when a wave passes over it. This is one of the Mishnayot that are studied publicly. A needle is small and thin, so its owner is worried that it may fall into the water and get lost. They therefore place the needle on the step right at the top of the mikveh, where the mikveh's water still reaches. The method of immersing the needle is by setting the water in motion until a wave rises onto the top. The person puts their hand into the water and shakes it back and forth until a wave of water passes over the needle lying on the step. This renders the needle ritually pure, and it can now be used for its proper purpose without any issues. Okay, that's the Mishnah in a nutshell. Section C, the needle's purpose. We will now explain the practical lesson every person can learn from this Mishnah for their personal divine service. What could you possibly extract from this Mishnah? It's a scenario about a person who has a needle which is ritually impure, has an impure status to it, and he wants it to be pure for whatever reason. It doesn't need to be pure, it's not required. And he puts it on the step of the mikvah and he shakes a little water so that the wave should pass over because he didn't want to put it in and make it lost. You know, back in the day, we're talking 2,000 years ago, I'm sure it wasn't a simple thing to make a needle. You have to take a piece of metal, you have to work on it to make it sharp to a point. Nowadays, it's manufactured by the thousands on a daily basis. It's not a problem. But still, this was a method that somebody might use to immerse their needle in a safer way so they shouldn't get lost. But what can you possibly, what is the energy, the soul of this Mishnah that we could possibly extract? Okay. There are 4 layers of Torah interpretation. It's known in Hebrew as Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Soid. Pshat is the literal, the simple meaning. Remez is a meaning, a layer of allusion, of hinting. Drush is it's a deeper layer of elucidation, extracting one thing from another. And the final level is the level of Soid, which is the secret, the mystery, the hidden, the Kabbalah of the Torah, the deepest layer. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's methodology was to weave the revealed parts of the Torah together with the inner dimension of Torah. He would take a Talmudic discussion and explain it in Kabbalistic terms. I'll just throw an example that just came to my head. I remember learning once from his father's teachings, there's an argument between, I think it was Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi in the Talmud about some particular topic. And the Rebbe's father just went on explaining how this person said this opinion and this one said this one because of their root of their souls, the way that's reflected in their names. This is the direction their minds went when they had their opinions, because it's reflective of who their soul is. This is fascinating stuff. Anyway, in the following teaching, the Rebbe quotes his father who explained this Mishnah Kabbalistically. He interprets needle in terms of us and our divine service and explains what the mikvah and water represent. It's an incredible teaching that lends new meaning to each and every word. So let's go. Connecting clothes. Says the Rebbe, the role of a needle, what does a needle do? You ever think about this? What does a needle do? A needle used to sew clothing, but think about it. What is the actual function of the needle? The role of a needle is to connect, sewing 2 things together and making them into one. That's what the function of a needle is. For example, when one wishes to attach part of a garment, such as a sleeve, to the garment, this is done by sewing them together with a needle. The process of sewing works like this. Using the sharp point of the needle, a hole is made in the garment. The point of the needle parts the garment and makes a hole in it. And then the thread attached to the other end of the needle is passed through the hole. This is how the sleeve is attached to the garment, making it into a complete garment. Now, you may be wondering, why is the Rebbe giving us a sewing tutorial in detail? Explain how a needle works. I know how a needle works. You put it in the clothing, you pull it through, and done. The Rebbe is explaining each and every detail of it because every single detail of this is relevant and is reflecting a divine reality, because this is a Torah teaching. Connecting material and spiritual. The above serves as a parable for our task of making a beautiful and grand, quote-unquote, garment for Hashem, for God. Assembling this garment requires us to use a needle. Our divine mission in this world is to attach, to sew the material elements of the world to Hashem. Okay, so 1 second. So Chassidus explains that the divine light that creates and gives life to physical creations in this world is its true existence. The divine light that creates the universe and creates our reality, that is its true existence. Because without this light, creation cannot exist. I'm explaining to you literally thousands of pages of Chassidus in 17 words. So if you don't understand it fully, there's a reason for it. It's okay. You just have to learn more, that's all. However, Hashem created the world in such a manner that the divine light is concealed. And our eyes only see the physical entity itself. When a person looks at their surroundings, like these surroundings, they appear to be an independent existence that does not need any external force to sustain it. Our role in this world is to reveal the word of Hashem that lays behind the material existence and to declare that God is king, as we say in the high holiday prayers. Every being shall know that you created it. How do we accomplish this? So says the Rebbe further, page 4. This is a beautiful example. An example that is relevant even to a young child. When a child eats or drinks, they first make a blessing to Hashem before consuming the physical item. The most basic blessing is the one said for water, which is Shahakal Niya B'dvarei, by whose word all things came to be. Everything in the world was created by Hashem, and when we make this blessing, we attach the water to Hashem because we proclaim and reveal that the water is not an independent entity, but a creation of Hashem. As a result, the water becomes attached to Hashem. Yeah, so Hashem empowers every Jew to reveal the divine hiding behind creation. Every single Jew. When a Jew takes a glass of water and declares by whose word all things came to be, they reveal the secret of the divine creation of the physical world and thus connect the physical with Hashem. Through this blessing, we declare that all of physical existence is not an independent entity, but rather a creation of Hashem. Going further, the Rebbe says the child affects not only the water that they are drinking, but also the water in the rivers and the seas, all the water in the world. The people passing by these rivers and seas may be non-Jewish adults or children who don't perceive any of this. But when a Jewish child who was taught to make a blessing by whose word all things came to be, to the point that it becomes second nature, and he or she requires no reminder, their very awareness that water requires a blessing forges the connection of the water to Hashem. Yeah, so moreover, this revelation occurs not only when a person makes a blessing and drinks the water, but even when they aren't eating and drinking. The very fact that the child knows that Hashem created the apple or the water or whatever it is, and therefore makes a blessing before eating them or drinking them without even needing to be reminded, itself uncovers the spiritual dimension, the spiritual reality behind the material. So where does the needle come in? Attaching and sewing the material matters to the world, of the world, to Hashem, is carried out in a similar fashion to the way a needle sews. In order to attach the material to Hashem, we must first pierce a hole through the material. It's funny, material here has two translations. Material is like physical material matter. The hole is made by the sharp point of the needle, an analogy for the strength and power Jews have, knowing that we are Hashem's children and agents. As a result, we aren't deterred by the fact that we live in a big world filled with material matters that aren't holy. We push apart the material and pierce through it, creating a hole for the needle to pass through. After using our Jewish confidence and strength to pierce through the material of the world, we pass a thread through this hole we have punched. The thread alludes to the mitzvahs, as illustrated by the mitzvah of tzitzis, for which we pierce a hole in a garment and pass the tzitzis strings through it. Tzitzis alludes to all of the mitzvahs because it serves as a reminder for them all. This means drawing Torah and mitzvahs down into the material world and using them to, quote unquote, sow the material matters of the world to Judaism and godliness. Okay. In Chassidus, it is explained that the word mitzvah, commandment, comes from the root word meaning connection. Mitzvah actually on a deeper level means connection and attachment. This signifies that through performing a mitzvah, whatever the mitzvah might be, one connects and unites with the infinite creator. When a person fulfills a mitzvah, they are bridging and linking between Hashem and the world. For example, when someone puts up a mezuzah on the doorpost of their home, or any of the doorposts that require a mezuzah, they are connecting their home with Hashem. When a child recites a blessing over food, they are connecting the food to Hashem. When someone gives tzedakah, charity from their personal money, they are linking their money and the work they put into it to Hashem. We are Jews acknowledging that the house, food, and money belong to the creator of the universe who made them and grants the person the ability to enjoy them. Thus, mitzvahs are essentially threads that connect the world with Hashem. However, to insert a thread into a fabric or anything else, a hole must be made into the fabric. And to make the hole, a needle is used. The sharp point of the needle pierces a hole in a piece of fabric, allowing the thread to pass through it, as we just learned. The Rebbe explains that the Jew is the needle. And our role is to make a hole in this physical and material world and thread the mitzvah into it. It's not a destructive hole. On the contrary, it's like you have a darkness in a room and it's light outside. You put a hole through one of the walls, you're destroying. You're not destroying. You're bringing light into the room. Now you can see. The world by its nature is not necessarily ready to accept the mitzvah, so to speak. The needle needs to be sharp and piercing to succeed in threading the mitzvah into the material world. Perhaps we could say this is why Jews sometimes have an element of sharpness or a little bit of chutzpah, because without it, they would never be able to thread a mitzvah into the life of this physical world. To endure as a Jew, one needs a bit of chutzpah. Some people are embarrassed to put up a mezuzah on their office door or their homes because many employees pass by, many neighbors pass by. They might start asking questions, which they don't have answers. It's uncomfortable. Or sometimes when somebody might attend a party where the food isn't necessarily kosher. They don't want to eat non-kosher food, but they also don't want to cause a scene. So they excuse their refusal to eat by saying they are vegetarian, or they're allergic to the food, they're on a special diet, or that they ate at home before they came to the party, I'm full already. A Jew needs a lot of chutzpah to successfully withstand all these challenges. And this is the needle, the Jewish chutzpah, the firmness with which one breaks through the world and injects it with godliness. And as the Rebbe said many times, that when a Jew acts like a Jew openly, sometimes a Jew feels uncomfortable in front of everybody else, so they try to hide their Jewishness. I'll put a baseball cap over my yarmulke. I don't know, if I say a blessing over my food, I'll say it very, very quietly, and I'll mumble it so fast and nobody even notices I said something. Because what am I talking to my food? That's just strange, right? The people around us, when they see this kind of behavior, they're uncomfortable with it. Deep down, they sense this is a two-faced behavior. You're a Jew and you're trying to act not like a Jew. Whereas when a Jew stands strong, a little bit of healthy chutzpah, and openly and brazenly acts like a Jew, says a blessing clearly and openly before eating a food, eats only kosher food, and says that's why they're not eating the other food at the party and they're only eating kosher food, and so on and so forth, this causes those around them to respect them. I know somebody that I'm saying this is a common thing. Somebody talk from experience that they act like a Jew openly in a non-Jewish setting, and everyone in their setting looks up to them. I don't know somebody personally. I know for myself, when I openly act like a Jew, people look up to that. Last section, section D, the purity on the front lines. After explaining, page 6, after explaining the deeper significance of the needle, we can now continue to explain the Mishnah about the purification process of a needle. In order to achieve this attachment of the material world to Hashem, we cannot just remain in the holy temple, the holy city of Jerusalem, or the holy land of Israel. In these holy places, we don't interact with non-Jews in the world as a whole. We must descend into the mundane world where unholiness and impurity is prevalent, a place of exile. Yeah, so to connect the spiritual with the material, we can't remain cloistered in the study hall or synagogue. We cannot remain inside our Jewish bubble. We need to go out. We must affect the outside world. Since our mission requires us to descend to a level where impurity is present, we need to purify ourselves through immersion. We need to ensure that our descent into exile doesn't, God forbid, contaminate the purity of the needle, the Jewish needle through which we bring Judaism to the world. Yeah, so since we need to go out and have contact with the outside world in places that there are sometimes unclean, we need to ensure that we stay wholly unaffected by our surroundings. Rebbe goes further. Safe space. The Mishnah addresses this with its statement, if a ritually unclean needle is placed on one of the steps leading to a mikveh in a cave and someone sets the water in motion, the needle is purified when a wave passes over it. Cave, underground hole, alludes to the descent to exile. The step refers to a higher place within the cave, close to the exit. This indicates to us that even as we are in exile, we are in a safe space where we have no reason to fear getting lost in the depths of the cave. Hashem sees that we can't handle the struggle of the lowest levels in the depths of the cave. This is especially true in our generation, as we are very near the exit from the cave of exile, on the brink of the true and complete redemption. As a result, we can all go about our mission with confidence, knowing that the needle is on the step of the cave. Yeah, so the Mishnah has good news for us. Indeed, the cave is deep, it's dark. Exile is difficult and frightening, and we can become lost in it. However, Hashem places a step there, creating a shallow waters, which aren't so scary and are easier to navigate. To guarantee this, we must, quote, set the water in motion until, quote, a wave passes over the needle. We need to take the water of Torah and pass it over our needle, immersing our entire being in the waters of Torah. We can do this by having, especially for Jewish children, regular times for daily Torah study and mentally reviewing Torah matters that we have committed to memory. So how do we preserve our personal purity? We need to ensure that Torah's waters flood over us, that we are drenched in Torah, that we maintain our purity and can continue bridging the gap between the physical and the spiritual in the best possible way. So let's go through some key points and a takeaway. Bottom page 7, you can see it yourself. The Mishnah in Mikvaot discusses the laws of immersing a needle on the step of a mikvah. The Rebbe, quoting his father, explains this deeper spiritual meaning of this Mishnah in serving God. 2, the purpose of a needle is to connect two things. This is achieved through the sharp point of the needle that pierces a hole in the fabric, allowing the thread to pass through. 3, this is a parable for our mission to connect the physical elements of the world to Hashem. We accomplish this through sharpness, our Jewish strength that penetrates the physical world. 4, for example, when a young child recites the blessing Shahakol Niya B'dvaro, by whose word all things came to be, they are connecting the water to Hashem. 5, to spiritually connect the physical with the divine, a Jew cannot remain in the holy temple. They must go out into the world. Therefore, there is a need for purification through immersion to ensure that external impurity does not affect them. This immersion is in the waters of knowledge of the Torah. What are we holding? 6. 6. The needle is immersed in the step of the cave, a high place within the cave where there is no risk of losing the needle. In the analogy, God sees that the Jew cannot handle a deep immersion, so he places them in a situation where there is no risk of spiritually drowning. The takeaways: our role in life is to connect the physical with the spiritual. The power to do this comes from two things: Jewish pride and repeated immersion in the waters of knowledge of the Torah. I want to just stress on this point a little bit. There needs to be a pull in both directions, okay? On the one hand, we're taught that you can't shelter yourself. The world is crazy. The world is dark. I'll stay, cooped up in my hole. I'll study Torah. I'll pray. I'll do mitzvahs. I'll stick within my strict cluster of fellow Jews who have the same perspective as me. I'll be safe. We're safe from outside influences. The problem with this is that the world is safe from your influences as well. You have the ability to positively affect the world, and you're not, because you're stuck. You're in your space. So there's a need to leave your holy space, your pure space, and go into the world where it's not so holy, it's not so pure, and to drag holiness and light there as well. So there's major focus on the world that we, as Jews, we need to affect the world. At the same time, When we make our sole focus only to affect the world, what starts to happen is, what can happen is, and what unfortunately sometimes does happen is, that the world is very dark. And sometimes the darkness that we're involved in can overtake us and affect us. We're supposed to go and affect the world, but sometimes the world can come back and spit us in the face. So we also need to be pulled in the other direction. That while we're involved in the world, we know this is not truly our place. Our place is the shul, is the synagogue, is the study hall. Our place is sitting in front of a Torah book for hours a day or minutes a day, whatever you're able to do. This is my place. This is who I am. This is my true identity. Yes, I have a mission. I need to affect the world, but I also am a Jew whose my place is in holiness, not in darkness. Not in my place is in light, not in darkness. So we need to affect the world. We need to interact with others, teach them, educate them, guide them. At the same time, we need to study Torah. We need to connect to Hashem. We need to find times and make times to pray and to do mitzvahs every day. Thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. And wishing everybody a great night and a good Shabbos.